Okay, welcome back. So this is week number 2 of Pirkei Avos. I wish I could translate that. We went through last week a number of different explanations for what that means. We'll call it chapters of the fathers. And last week we studied the first 3 paragraphs, the first 3 Mishnayos, and today I'm hoping that we'll do the next 3. Just to recap, because we're going to tie it in. So last week in the second Mishnah, we learned the teaching of Shimon HaTzadik, Shimon the righteous, and he taught that the world stands on 3 things: on Torah, on Avoda, service of God, and on Gemilus Chasadim, on acts of kindness. And we explained by, again, there's many different ways to understand each of these teachings, but the way that we understood it was that the world stands on 3 things, meaning the world was really created so that mankind can engage in these 3 things. That would bring about the purpose of creation, which is for the creations, us, to develop a relationship with God, a closeness with God, which is achieved through making ourselves similar to God and doing acts that bring us close. So Torah study gives us the mindset, the perspective of God. We become similar to God in that way. Acts of kindness are the acts of God. They are emulating and walking in God's ways. And then acts of service to God themselves bring us close to him. So all those are for that purpose, so that we can get close to God, and ultimately when our souls return to him, they will have earned the right, so to speak, to experience God in the greatest form. That was the teaching of Shimon HaTzadik. And then we learned at the end, the third Mishnah, which taught that a person, when serving God, shouldn't be doing so in order to earn reward, but rather they should do so without the intent to earn reward. And we discussed that. So the next Mishnah, which is Mishnah 4, Mishnah Daled, teaches as follows. And I sent it in the email, I think, the source sheet. And if you didn't get it, then, and you have a Pirkei Avos, you can get it from there. So the teaching there is Yossi ben Yoezer ish Tzreda. Yossi, the son of Yoezer, a man from Tzreda, and Yosei ben Yochanan ish Yerushalayim. Yosei, the son of Yochanan, from Yerushalayim. Kiblu Mehem. They accepted from them. They were the next main link in the chain of our tradition in passing on Torah to the next generation. So they accepted it from them, meaning the previous sages that were mentioned, which actually in the exactly preceding Mishnah, Mishnah 3, which we learned last week, it only mentioned one, Antignos, and preceding that was Shimon HaTzadik, Shimon the righteous. But here it says they accepted from them. So seemingly they received from both Antignos and Shimon HaTzadik. And now it will tell us what each of them taught. So it says, Yosei ben Yoezer ish Tzreda Omer. Yosei ben Yoezer, the son of Tzreda, he would say as follows, Yehi veischa veisvad lachachamim. Your house should be a gathering place for sages. Vehave misabek ba'afar ragleim, and one should be misabek in the dust of their feet. The word misabek is actually a difficult word to translate. It kind of actually, at its source, also means dust. You should dust in the dust of their feet. But here we translate as sit in the dust of their feet. And thirdly, v'havei shosa v'tzama es divreihem. A person should drink with thirst their words. So Yosei ben Yoezer taught 3 things. A person's house should be a gathering place for sages. One should sit in the dust of their feet, of the sages, and one should drink their words. Now, before we get too deeply into this, I want to just go to the next Mishnah for a second and see what that one's about. So the next Mishnah teaches Yosei ben Yochanan ish Yerushalayim. So that was the other person mentioned in this Mishnah, Yosei, the son of Yochanan from Jerusalem. He would say, Your house should be wide open V'yu aniyim b'nei veisecha, and the poor should be members of your household. And then he says a bunch of other things, which when we get there, we'll discuss. But I just wanted to, for now, highlight the beginning of that Mishnah, which is that your house should be wide open. So again, we're going to be working with the commentary, the Midrash Shmuel, primarily. Midrash Shmuel, again, written by Rav Shmuel de Uzida, the 16th century Kabbalist and teacher from Tzfat. So he points out that the two Mishnahs that we just mentioned now, plus the preceding one, so Mishnahs 4, 5, and 6, are all following up on the third Mishnah. So we had this teaching. The world stands on three things: on Torah, on service of God, and on acts of kindness. The following three Mishnahs each address one of those three things. So first, they're not in order, but the first one addressed service of God, and it discussed how one is to serve God. Don't serve God with the intent of receiving reward, but rather serve God without the intent of receiving reward. This Mishnah that we're beginning with today is discussing Torah, how one acquires Torah. Sit at the dust of the, your house should be a house for the sages, and sit at the dust of their feet and drink in their words with great thirst. That's Torah. And then the next Mishnah, which says your house should be wide open and the poor should be members of your household. So that's teaching acts of kindness. So the Mishnah, so these are building on the three pillars which the world stands on. And we'll examine each one individually. Again, we talked about Mishnah about service of God last week. So we're starting here from the teaching of Yosei ben Yoezer. Your house should be a house, a gathering place for the sages. You should sit in the dust of their feet, and you should drink with thirst from their words. So the Abarbanel explains that this Mishnah is teaching us how a person can merit to acquire Torah knowledge and thereby aid them in achieving their mission and their purpose. And the Mishnah teaches that one of the best ways would be if a person can make their house available. Again, we're going to interpret this in different ways, but the way Abarbanel says it is you should make your house a gathering places of sages, a place where the sages can gather to teach and to learn. And if our house is a place that hosts Torah in it, so then he says, will certainly merit to gain in Torah, either as a reward, or from listening to them, or just through osmosis. But a person who makes their home a home that hosts Torah sages, so they will merit Torah. Now, of course, that's not an available option to everyone out there, but we can bring Torah into our house through Zoom. That's, thank God we have that opportunity. So that this could even be a fulfillment of this, right? It's a gathering place. Each of our homes right now is a gathering place for all of us for Torah. So that's a beautiful, Zoom is wonderful, but that's an additional benefit. We literally can bring Torah into our house in this way. However, the Mishnah continues with, the Abarbanel says, with some conditions. And that is that if a person is always hosting and providing for Torah sages in their house, the person might become a little bit too comfortable and see themselves as, oh, well, I'm providing for you and you owe me so much. So the Mishnah tells us, no, you should sit in the dust of their feet, meaning one should remain humble despite the fact that they are providing for these sages. And then thirdly, or really the second condition, the first condition is one must remain humble. And the second condition is that we have to drink their words with thirst. In other words, if we are constantly surrounded by Torah, then a person potentially, it might become a light in their eyes. They might become bored of it. So the Mishnah teaches that no, we have to try to always approach it with a thirst, which comes from really appreciating that there's always so much more to be learned. We think we've heard it before. There's always more to glean. And the more we delve into something, the more that we can gain from it. And to always approach it with a thirst for more and more knowledge. And so even if a person's house is a constant place for hosting Torah study, but don't let it become old to you, always drink it with thirst. So this is one of the ways that a person can acquire Torah. Again, it's by hosting Torah in their home, and on condition that we not become too arrogant about it and sort of lording over those that we're hosting. Rather, we should remain humble and continue to drink their words in with thirst. Another interesting interpretation about drinking in their words with thirst. So the Midrash Shmuel quotes from a Rabbi Yehuda ibn Shushan, who says that it means to drink it like you're thirsty, but not to, like, the way the expression he uses is not to like stuff it down like the Jordan River, meaning don't overdo it. A person loves Torah, which is wonderful, and they can push themselves very hard, and it's always good to to push ourselves and involve ourselves in a lot of Torah study, but a person could cross a line where it becomes too much for them. And certainly this happens sometimes, unfortunately, to yeshiva students who just push themselves too hard. And in yeshiva, that's what we do. We spend many hours learning Torah. People stay up to to very late hours, and some people stay up to too late hours, and then often, or sometimes it works out, it's great, but sometimes it's unfortunately the expression usually is to get burnt out. Here the expression is to get washed away. He's saying, if you drink in too much, then you could get washed away. So that's a warning according to that interpretation. Now, in terms of following in their footsteps, it says as I said, it's hard to translate. It says to get dusty in the dust of their feet. So it's translated here as to sit at the dust of their feet, which is how some commentaries explain it. Others say, follow them around, follow the sages around, even though they're kicking up dust because you're walking behind them, but follow them around in order to be able to hear and to watch and to see. We can learn much just from observing our great sages as much as listening to what they say. So we can follow them around and learn from them that way as well. Another interpretation of this word, to bring up dust, is based on the episode where Yaakov fights the angel. So when Yaakov is traveling, he's running away from the house of Lavan. He's actually running away from Esav at this point, and he has to go back for some jugs, and he encounters an angel, and it says Vayeavek Ishimo, and this angel, it's understood to mean that he wrestled with him. This angel wrestled with him, and there the word is Vayeavek. So it's the same root as misabek, abek. So the root is aleph, bet, kuf, which means, as I said, to bring up dust. So there it means to wrestle. So some understand, the Midrash Shmuel brings an interpretation, it means to wrestle with their dust. What does it mean? So it means that if we welcome in sages enough and we study enough with them, then we can grow to a level where we can wrestle with them in Torah. That's part of the experience of Torah study and arriving at truth in Torah, is to argue it out, to try to understand what a position as best we could, and to question it and to argue on it from a desire to find truth. And so it's could be like a wrestling match. And so he says we can understand the words to, again, misabek, which just means to get dusty with the dust of their feet. So some say it means to sit at their feet, at the dust of their feet. Some say it means to follow them But Midrash Shmuel says maybe it means to be able to wrestle with them, to learn Torah enough that we can now grapple and wrestle on our own and sort of be able to take up a position on our own because we've gained enough knowledge. And finally, I'll offer one more interpretation here, which is that when it says, let your home be a home for sages, it means that we should make the house of the sages into a second home for us. The study hall or the place in shul, in the synagogue where people go to study, wherever it might be, that should become like a home to us. So it doesn't mean to make our house, to bring sort of the base medrash, the study hall, into our house, which is the simple interpretation. It means make the study hall into your house. It means spend a lot of time in houses of study, make them like a second home. So that could be what the method, the strategy for acquiring Torah knowledge is. Let your house be the house of the sages, meaning the house of the sages, the place where people study should become like your house, the place where the Torah classes are taking place. Again, whether it's physical or virtual, but let that become your home, and that is a method for acquiring Torah. So that is the fourth Mishnah. Again, we're tying it back to the three pillars which the world stands on. We first did service of God last week, serve God without the intent to receive reward. Now we're doing Torah here. The methods for acquiring Torah: make our houses places of study, or make the place of study like our house. We should learn from the sages, follow them, and drink in their words with thirst. Realize that there's always much to be gained, and have such an approach, to approach it with a great desire to learn, but not to overdo it, we also said. Okay, moving on to the fifth Mishnah, Mishnah Hey, Mishnah 5. So here, this is a little bit of a more difficult Mishnah to explain, as you'll see. So the Mishnah says that Yosei ben Yochanan, Yosei, the son of Yochanan, man of Jerusalem, he said as follows: first of all, Yehe Veischa Pasuach Lirvacha, your house should be open wide. V'yu aniyim b'nei Veisecha, and the poor should be members of your household. Ve'al tarbe sicha im ha'isha, and the person shouldn't speak too much with women. A man shouldn't speak much with women. And then it says be'ishto amru. They said this. The sages said this about one's own wife. One shouldn't speak too much to one's own wife. And kal v'chomer be'eshes chaver. Kal v'chomer is a logical mechanism. There's no English word for it. In English, it's translated to Latin, a fortiori. I don't know if that helps anyone, but it means all the more so, basically. So if they said it about one's own wife, then all the more so, be'eshes chaver, all the more so for someone else's wife, one shouldn't speak too much with them. And then it continues, it says, Mikan amru chachamim, from here. The sages said, Kol zman she'adam marbe sicha ima isha, anytime a man speaks too much to women, Gorem ra'a la'atzmo, he causes evil for himself, uvotel midivrei Torah, and it distracts him or negates him from Torah study, v'sofo yoresh gehenim, and his end will be Gehenim, will be hell, and it doesn't end well. So this Mishnah seems to go from just totally off. Like it was talking about, it starts off, it says you should have your home wide open, and your house should be a house for the poor. And then it says, and don't talk to women too much, which we can understand, and we'll discuss it more what that means, but just seems totally unrelated to the first half of the Mishnah. So that's something we'll have to try to explain. Besides for explaining what it means a person shouldn't talk too much with their wife, that also sounds a little bit strange. So we'll have to go step by step here. Being, though, that we're understanding that each of these three Mishnahs that we just discussed are each a follow-up to the three pillars. So the third pillar is gemilus chasadim, acts of kindness. So this is the Mishnah that would coincide with that. So it gives an example of a form of kindness, which is to have your home wide open and to welcome in the poor. I think that we need to understand that non-specifically. In other words, not everybody has the opportunity to do that, to open their home to the poor, to have their home wide open for people. There's many reasons why that may not be a sensible thing and may not fit a person's lifestyle, but there are many ways that a person can do chesed, can do kindness. I think the lessons that we're going to glean from this Mishnah can be applied to other forms of kindness as well, as we'll see. So the first thing is, it says, let your home be wide open. So the Midrash Shmuel explains what that means is that our homes, you should build your home in a convenient location where people can access it. And the entrance should be obvious. Don't put the entrance in like a back alley that people who need help, the poor, won't be able to find where to knock, where to go. But rather, it should be in a place that's obvious. It should be wide open. It should be clear to people where to find the entrance, welcoming, and that way people in need will come by. And so the application of that beyond the literal interpretation is in general to make ourselves available for kindness. Sometimes we want to help someone and we offer to help, but then it's almost like an empty offer because we don't follow up, or we don't really give them the opportunity. We know that it's hard, they don't want to ask, but we don't push them. So there's an effort that's involved in really making ourselves available, kind of putting ourselves out there to do kindness for others. If we can use this as a metaphor, don't put our door in like a hidden location where nobody can reach us. Rather, it should be wide open, meaning we should really make ourselves available for acts of kindness and not just pretend, or even if we're not pretending, but we can mean it, but then not actually properly make ourselves available to help others. So takeaway from me, number one, from this Mishnah, again, beyond the literal translation of having a wide open doors, is metaphorically having an open door, having an open door for people to be able to come to us for their needs, which also has to do with how we respond when somebody actually does. If we respond in a kind manner when somebody does come to us, then they'll come to us again and others will come to us. But if we kind of begrudgingly help or whatever, right? So then that's like closing our door. That's like building our door in the back alley and saying, you can, if you find me, then maybe I'll help you, but I'm not really making myself available. So that's, for me, takeaway number one. Now he brings a very interesting, another interesting explanation of the Mishnah. See, according to that explanation, so it means let your home be wide open, and that way the poor can be members of your household, they can find their way in. Another interpretation that he offers is that let your door be wide open and your household members will be poor. In other words, he says that that even if by making ourselves, helping out others, it means that we will become poor and the members of our household will be poor, he says still, one should do it. One should still do it. That's his second, another interpretation. Now, obviously that takes a person to be on quite a level. They say these stories of like Hasidic rabbis who did that. A poor person would come, they have nothing left to give. They sold their last thing in their house to be able to give to the poor. I'm not on that level. Most people, I'm assuming, are not on that level to actually become poor in order to help others. But again, a takeaway could be to sort of take stock and decide what it means to be poor, right? And what we really need, what's essential, what's beyond what we're willing to sacrifice and to help others. And maybe it's a bit of a reminder that, I can't give charity because I don't have any money to give charity. Why? Because I have this, and I need this, and I need that, I need that, I need that. Of course, if my list of things that I need is a mile long, then I'm not getting any money left for charity. So even if we're not making ourselves poor, there may be a little bit more that we could be doing than we thought. If we give it some thought, real consideration, real contemplation, then it may be that we could be doing more. So the Mishnah, the lesson here is let our house be wide open. In other words, let open ourselves up, even if it's at the expense of our own household. Not necessarily do we need to make ourselves poor, but we can extend ourselves a little bit, possibly. Another explanation is how to give charity. How to give charity. So you should have your doors wide open, and the poor people should be members of your household, meaning we should treat the poor like members of our household. When we give to our children, to members of our household, so we do so with joy. We're so happy to give to them. So the Mishnah could be teaching us how we're to give to others as well, to those in need. When we give to others, we should treat them the same way that we do our children. We should give to them with that same joy. When we do a mitzvah, any mitzvah, we should do it with joy. And here it's specifically acts of charity, acts of kindness should be done with joy. And according to this, it would mean, again, your house should be open and the poor should be like members of your household, meaning we should treat them in the same way that we treat the members of our household. And again, we're not necessarily dealing directly with the poor, but anybody who we're helping, anybody who's in need, anybody who we're doing an act of kindness to, we should do it with joy. We should do it the same way that we would do it to a member of our household. We should do it for another person. Another possibility, he says, is that this is not an instruction that our house should be wide open, but rather it's a promise of reward, even though we said not to serve God for reward, but it's saying in the English, in the Hebrew, Yehi Veischa Pasuach Revacha, we're translating it to mean your house should be wide open, but it can also really mean your house will be wide open. Meaning, if we give to the poor, if we make the poor into members of our household, if we do give charity, then our house will be wide open. In other words, our house will be expanded, will be rewarded with wealth. This is a common theme in the Torah that by giving tzedakah, by giving charity, a person gets rewarded with wealth. It's a whole discussion on its own. There's actually, even though in general we say not to do things in order to receive reward, and we say in general we're not supposed to test God for reward. Actually, charity in certain contexts may be a unique exception to that, but that's its own discussion. But this would fit into that it's saying your house will become wide open, meaning it will become expanded. You'll have our material wealth will grow as a result of making the poor into members of our household.
Can I make a comment about that?
Please.
So if you think of it as along the lines of the idea that Hashem entrusts us with wealth in order to use it in that way, then when we do use it in that way, we'll get more of it to continue using it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, another explanation. We have a lot of explanations, but I think each one has like a very practical takeaway. Another explanation that he offers is it's saying, let your home be wide open to all types of people, whether they're rich, whether they're poor. And that way, you see, if we only open it up to the poor, then the poor people feel sort of targeted. They feel like, oh, they're only doing it for me because I'm poor. Makes them feel bad about themselves. But if a person opens up their home for everybody, and treats everybody equally, so then the poor don't feel bad. Oh, he's doing it for the rich as well. Everybody comes to his table. I shouldn't feel uncomfortable coming to his or her table. So the Mishnah would read, let your home be wide open to all, and the poor should be like members of your household, meaning they'll feel more comfortable that way. And this has again, this could just be an example of it, but also a very practical takeaway, which is how to do acts of kindness. We shouldn't turn the person on the receiving end into like make them feel like they're like an object of our kindness. We have to be sensitive, very sensitive to how we do it, and we shouldn't make the person feel like badly or feel like sometimes the person just doesn't want to feel needy. So the more sensitive we can be to those feelings, the better. So one way that this Mishnah is offering is by treating everybody. But if we do kindnesses for everybody, then the poor don't, or the needy don't feel singled out. So that's just a matter of being sensitive when performing acts of kindness for others. So before we move on to the next section of the Mishnah about talking to women, so let's just summarize. We gave, I think, 5 interpretations here. So number 1, we said that we want to make the entrance to our home should be accessible. And again, we can understand that metaphorically, we should make ourselves accessible for doing acts of kindness. Don't make it hard to find us. Be sincere when we offer to help and follow up. That's true kindness. Number 2, we said that sometimes we could read the Mishnah. Your house should be wide open, even if it means that our household will become poor, even if it means that we're sacrificing our own household. Like I said, that's probably beyond most of our levels, but it doesn't mean that we can't sacrifice also. We can't extend ourselves to do kindness. There's probably something that we can give up on if it's at odds with our ability to give charity or to do kindness. So something to consider. The third was it's how we do acts of kindness, how we give charity. We should do it with joy, just as we would give meaning treat the poor or whoever's the recipient of our kindness like our own household. The poor should be members of our household. You should treat them in the same way we would do kindness for members of our household. That's how we should do kindness for those in need, with the same joy, the same smile. Another possibility is that it's actually just telling us the reward for kindness and for charity. Our house will become wide open, will become expanded. Our wealth could be material wealth, could be expanded through charity. And finally, it could mean that we should keep our house wide open to everybody, treating everybody equally. And then the poor will feel like members of our household, because then the recipients, the needy, won't feel bad about themselves. Oh, he's only doing it for me because I'm in need, because I'm poor, whatever it might be. But if we do it for everybody, so then they won't feel that way. And that's a lesson in just the sensitivity. However it plays out, it will play out differently in every scenario. But being sensitive, the person doesn't want to feel like a charity case, so just to be, and whether it's because someone's poor, whether they're in need for other reasons, people have many needs, and we just have to be careful about being sensitive to that and how we give to them, how we help them. Okay, so then the Mishnah continues and it says, do not engage in too much discussion with women. So obviously speaking to men, and the same would go the other way around, that a woman shouldn't talk to a man too much. And the first question is, what is the connection between this and what we've been saying up till now? So the most simple and obvious, I think, is offered by the Abarbanel. It's talking to someone who's opened up their home. They are involved in kindness, and these kindnesses are to both men and women. You have men who are poor, you have women who are poor. And the Mishnah is telling us that we have to be careful, that even if we're helping someone, we have to have boundaries. We have to be careful not to become too close with someone, especially when someone's vulnerable and we're helping them. It's just a position where, things can develop quickly, and it's telling us to be very careful. So we certainly should be helping and providing for others, whether it's men or women, and a man helping men or women, or a woman helping men or women. But we have to realize that we need to keep boundaries when dealing with somebody of the opposite gender. And then it continues and it says, because the sages even teach us not to speak too much with our own wives. Now, what does that mean? Because that does not sound like great advice to me. So what it means, again, obviously there's different ways to understand it, is that even with one's own wife, there have to be boundaries in terms of the focus on the physical. So the physical relationship is also very important in a marriage, but it can't be the only thing. And the Talmud already warns not to overdo it. Can't be constantly engaged in physical pleasure and that type of lifestyle. There absolutely should be. It's a very important part of it, but it can't be too much. And so therefore it would be speaking about certain types of talk with one's wife, and not to overly engage in discussions of that lead to physical sexual behavior when it's not appropriate. When it's appropriate, absolutely. When it's not appropriate, though, then one should be careful. And so if a person is supposed to be careful in how they speak with their wife, then certainly a person has to be careful with how they speak with any other woman. And again, especially a woman that a man is helping, offering, to they're poor, they're in need. So someone in a vulnerable position, especially there have to be very careful boundaries set up. Another explanation, very interesting explanation that he offers, is that it says you should open your home to the poor and don't speak too much to women. They say about your wife, all the more so other women. Meaning, a person might be resistant to bring others into their home because he wants to spend time with his wife, which is a wonderful thing. And he should spend time with his wife. Or a wife might not want to bring in guests because she wants to spend time with her husband. And there definitely are times when that's the right thing. But the Mishnah is saying it can't be all the time. We have to also look beyond our own personal, couple, our own relationship, and be able to look out of our own box and our own family and look to others. And therefore, the Mishnah is saying that it says welcoming guests, have your home be open for guests. And even though a person might be resistant to that, so that they can have more personal family time with their spouse. But no, it says don't talk to your wife too much, meaning don't let that override your ability to welcome others into your home. And again, that's a metaphor for not, or just an example for other things. It could be acts of kindness outside the home. Don't be too focused on our own personal family relationships and totally ignore the world around us. Now, furthermore, he says a person may be resistant to have people come to their house because he doesn't want the guests to be talking to his wife, which is also, again, the same boundaries. The woman of the household has to be careful with the male guest, certainly. And so there, the Mishnah warns that it also speaks to the guests. When the Mishnah says that a person shouldn't speak too much to a woman, so it's talking to a guest. It's telling a guest that they also have to understand that it would be improper for them to be engaged too much with the woman of the household. So I think, again, the most simple flow of this Mishnah, it talks about welcoming a guest, and then it talks about not talking too much for a man to not speak too much to a woman, and vice versa. So that's most easily understood to be talking about those relationships right there, the guests with the host, and because things can happen, and they do, and they have, and therefore it's important to have boundaries. In our tradition, where we learn that it says that Abraham and his wife Sarah, so they were involved in bringing many close to God, but we're taught that Abraham primarily worked with the men, and Sarah primarily worked with the women, because when we're talking about developing close relationships, so that's really how it has to be. Fine. So that's I think a general takeaway though from this is that this interpretation that it means a person might want to spend more time with their wife and therefore not welcome guests, but the Mishnah is telling us, okay, certainly there's time and place for that, but we also have to, family time is important, but we still have to be able to do acts of kindness. So whether, again, that's bringing people into our house, it could be acts of kindness outside the home. But if we're so focused on, well, Sunday, I can't do acts of kindness because Sunday is family day, right? Monday I'm working. Shabbos, I can't have guests over on Shabbat because that's family time. Well, when do you do acts of kindness? So these are the types of things that people grapple with. But the idea is to always try to have a proper balance of all of these, because there are many good and important things, and we have to try to find the right balance. Okay. Now the Mishnah has an interesting line. What comes about if one speaks too much with a woman or even with one's wife? So it says that he can cause bad or evil to himself. How does it say it? It says he causes bad for himself. He neglects the study of Torah, and in the end, he will inherit Gehenna. In the end, he will end up in hell. So that's sort of a follow-up of, you can imagine what can happen if a relationship between a man and a woman who are not married gets too not married to each other, I should say, gets too serious. So first of all, even before they act on it, but it takes over their minds, right? They become obsessed with each other, and that itself, just the fight that they then have to be involved in. So the Rabbeinu Yonah, one of the great medieval commentaries, he says, the Mishnah says he causes evil to himself. So the word ra, the word evil, he says, can refer to the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. You're bringing the evil inclination upon yourself. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes, we have enough struggles in our life without having to create more for ourselves. So the Mishnah is saying, don't put ourselves into situations where we're inviting temptation. Don't allow these relationships to develop where it now becomes a temptation. That's called causing evil for oneself. It's causing a temptation for oneself when it wasn't necessary. It caused one to neglect Torah because one's mind is elsewhere. You can't learn Torah when you are dreaming about another person, especially when someone that they shouldn't be dreaming about. And in the end, they could end up, the Mishnah is saying, they could end up in hell as a result. That's seemingly if they act on these temptations. So that's this Mishnah. So the Mishnah starts off with some instructive recommendations for engaging in acts of kindness, and which we discussed, different ways to understand, but I think really very practical lessons in how to do kindness. And then it warns us, though, to be careful within those relationships when we're doing kindness, especially, and specifically when we're engaged in acts of kindness to someone of the opposite gender, to just realize that we have to have boundaries and not let ourselves go beyond that. Okay, Mishnah Vav, the sixth Mishnah. Yehoshua ben Prachya v'Nitai ha'arbeli kiblu mehem. Yehoshua, the son of Prachya, and Nitai from Arbel, so they accepted from them, meaning from the last two sages that we mentioned, which were Yosei ben Yoezer and Yosei ben Yochanan. So Yehoshua ben Prachya Omer, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Prachya says, Asei lecha rav, make for yourself a teacher, appoint for yourself a teacher, ukinei lecha chaver, and acquire for yourself a friend, v'havedan es kol ha'adam l'kaf sichus, and one should judge every person with the scale weighted in their favor. In other words, judge them favorably when there might be a question that arises to their behavior. Try to judge them favorably. So three things: aseh lecha rav, appoint for yourself a teacher, acquire for yourself a friend, and judge others favorably. So first off, we just finished saying, not in this Mishnah, but in the previous one, that we should make our home a place for scholars, right? Meaning we should, and whether that's the physical home or the virtual home, we should bring many scholars into our home and learn from many people. We'll learn the Mishnah eventually that says, right, we should learn from everybody. But certainly we should learn from many teachers. That's a good thing. But the Mishnah says, Aseh lecha rav, make for yourself a teacher. A person should have a specific teacher, a specific rabbi that they turn to further questions, for clarification, especially when one learns from many different people. Sometimes you might hear different perspectives, which could become confusing. Hopefully most of what we hear is consistent, but at times it could become confusing. We could hear different perspectives from different people. We need to have someone that we can turn to for clarification, for direction, and for an approach. So that's number one here. Make for ourselves a teacher. Now, sometimes that teacher, it might be hard to find that teacher. We may live in a place where there isn't a teacher like that. And so then it could be that we have to sort of make for ourselves a teacher. We may have to join a group that, again, we have to obviously be careful about who we turn to learn from. But assuming that they represent the proper tradition, and we turn to them, even if they're not the greatest experts, we go to them to study with them. We could even maybe know more than them, but we need to have people to engage with and to study with. And sometimes that might mean, if we are joining a study group, hearing and learning from someone who may be even below our level. But sometimes it's worth it because we need to have a group within which to study. So another possible interpretation of make for yourself a teacher would mean make for yourself a teacher, even if that teacher is below your level, but you need to have a forum in which to study. And this kind of speaks to the importance of community, really, because, if I'm the smartest person in town, so I can't learn from anyone, so I'm just going to stay home, right? Because why would I go to learn from others if I'm smarter than them, right? But that excludes that will exclude me from the community. So that's not a good idea. So sometimes, what the Mishnah may be teaching us means make for yourself a teacher, even if it means submitting ourselves to someone who we think is not as knowledgeable as us. But still, if that is the way to become part of the community and to study amongst others, we need to be amongst others. We need the others to give us strength. So that so that would be necessary in some situations. Sometimes there isn't a teacher to learn from. We have to find a friend. And sometimes finding a friend is more difficult and takes more effort. A teacher is usually ready to teach, right? It's a one-way. It's a one-way relationship. In other words, like, I'm ready. Whoever comes on, right? I'll teach you. It's not a problem, right? So it's easy to find a teacher. It doesn't have to be, especially with Zoom, right? You could find any teacher. So make for yourself a teacher, fine. But to make a friend, that takes more effort, because there it has to be mutual to be a friend, except for on Facebook. But okay, even there, I think actually it has to be mutual. But right, it has to be mutual. So it takes a little more effort. And so there the Mishnah uses the word acquire. So it doesn't necessarily mean to acquire them with money, although I guess one way to make a friend is to pamper them a little bit. But there are other ways we can acquire them, with words and with kindness and with caring. And ultimately, that's the better way to acquire a friend, and will be a better friend. And so the Mishnah is telling us sometimes, besides for acquiring a teacher, or sometimes there's not a teacher available, we need friends to be able to bounce things off of. And it's always important to have a friend. But sometimes that takes a little more effort. We have to acquire the friend. And to build on that, in order to have a friend, you need to be able to judge favorably. If we can't judge others favorably, then we're not going to have too many friends. Really, that falls under the commandment to love our neighbor like ourselves, to love our fellow like ourselves, right? To judge favorably means that when we see something that somebody's doing that seems suspicious or suspect, we're not sure, it seems out of place, so we give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, when we do something that's maybe a bit off or a bit wrong, it's never wrong, right? We always have a justification for it. We always have a rationale for what we do, right? I've never done anything wrong in my life. I don't know about you, right? That we always have an explanation for why we do it. So to love your fellow like yourself would mean, so when you see somebody else, so rationalize for them, justify it, right? If you don't understand why they're behaving a certain way, well, imagine that you were the one who did that. What would you say? You come up with an explanation, you come up with a rationalization. So that's how we judge others favorably. Now, it happens to be we don't have to judge everybody favorably. If somebody is sort of established as someone who's an evildoer, that we don't have to judge them favorably. But regular people that we encounter, we're supposed to judge favorably. And the way that we do that is to love them like ourselves, to sort of imagine that was me. What would I say? How would I justify it? How would I rationalize it? And that's what we could do for others. And that's how we keep a friend. That's the only way to keep a friend, is to be able to judge favorably. And finally, one other way to understand this Mishnah, Aseh l'charav, make for yourself a teacher, means make yourself a teacher. Make yourself a teacher. We each have something to teach, have something to give to others. So teach it, share it with others. But sometimes the way to reach people is not by being their teacher. Sometimes we only reach people by being their friend. And there's different approaches. So for some, we say, when dealing with some people, make for yourself a teacher. I mean, I have this personally, right? For some people, the approach is, come to a class. For others, it's like, I put my arm around them and let's be friends and let's study together, whatever it might be, right? So this Mishnah is literally talking to me, but it's talking to all of us. It's saying we each can be a teacher, make yourself into a teacher, and also acquire friends, because sometimes we can influence others not through teaching, so to speak, but being a good friend. Okay. So that basically, I think we'll wrap it up for tonight. Let me just summarize the last Mishnah that we said. So we said, make for yourself a teacher, acquire for yourself a friend. Everybody needs a teacher that they can turn to. We can learn from many people, but we need to have someone that we can go to for clarification and direction. Sometimes it can be confusing to learn from many. And so we need to have someone to turn to for our questions at the end of the day. And then we also said that we said a few things, but one thing that I want to highlight is that, that it's easy to find a teacher. It's a little more effort to make a friend. And that's why we have to acquire a friend. It takes more effort. And ultimately also, we need to judge others favorably. That's the only way to keep a friend. All right, we will stop there. Thank you very much.